Good evening. Welcome to the Pullman City Council meeting for this July 11th. Nice to have you here. And Dee, would you please take roll?
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Dubin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember McCall.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Under announcements tonight, we still have some openings in the Arts Commission, Cemetery Committee, Civil Service Commission, and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. You can apply on the city website. You can meet downtown at the Pullman Depot Heritage Center on Friday, July 21st, starting at 5 o'clock for the self-paced Historic Preservation Commission annual walking tour. Members will be there to answer questions, discuss, and the last tour sets out about 6:30 in the evening. Remember, grinding is occurring now on Bishop Boulevard this week. If possible, consider alternative routes, but all the buses are open. We want to remind you about that. Concerts in the Park return to Rainey Park starting tomorrow, continue every Wednesday at 6 o'clock through August 16th. Movies in the Park are happening every Friday, July 14th through August 4th, dusk. And don't forget blankets and chairs. And Neal Public Library has a lot of different events going on every week during the summer. So on Wednesday tomorrow, we have the Mother Goose Story Time. Ages up to 2 at 10:15, preschool story time for 35s at 11, elementary, the Sand Art at 1 o'clock, and teen program, Sand Art at 3 o'clock. Thursday, I have the chance to read to kids. That'll be 10:30, and then they have popsicles on the patio for youth of all ages at 11 o'clock, so that's one way we're going to draw people in to listen to the mayor read. We have popsicles afterwards. And it's nice enough to have it outside so we don't mess up Neal Public Library. With that, we now go to presentations. This time, we have Wayne Thompson, who will be talking about the Pullman Transit Facility Master Plan. And I know you're going to open it up, and then I think we have our consultants Zoom. So Wayne, it's all yours.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As the mayor mentioned, I'll introduce the presentation, but it will be done virtually by our consultant who's joining us from Tacoma tonight. Our current transit facility was built in 1986, and there have been shop additions, one as recently as 2010 to handle the larger buses. But in 1986, they built a little larger, I'm sure, than they needed, and we're 35 years plus down the road, and we're going to look 20 years out. We've outgrown the facility. My first office 12 years ago had no windows. It's still an office. It was built as a meeting room. We have 25 buses, but our garages only hold 18. So we're at a point of trying to decide, have we outgrown the facility, or have we maybe even outgrown the location? So this became an active topic in January of 2022. I brought this as a discussion item to you, received direction to get proposals for a transit facility master plan. So we got three proposals, and we decided on TCF architecture out of Tacoma. And since August of 2022, when that was awarded to TCF, they've been on site. We've met with them virtually, as well as an on-site transit group and a larger oversight public works group. The presentation tonight will walk you through what we've done, what we've found, and give you some information to give us direction on finalizing that report. But it's been a good process. I think we've done what we set out to do, and I'm anxious to have you see it and comment on it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mark Hurley. He's our project manager from TCF Architecture, and Mark is joining us from the Tacoma area tonight. So Mark, I'll let you take it over from here, and he and I will both be available throughout this to answer questions.
All right, great. Thanks, Wayne. Good evening, everyone. Mayor, City Council, it's great to see you. Be able to present kind of what we've been working on over almost the past year. A little bit more about myself and our firm. So as Wayne said, I'm Mark Hurley with TCF Architecture. We're located in Tacoma, and we specialize in the design of maintenance operations and administration facilities for public works, beauties, and transportation agencies. So this is kind of right up in our wheelhouse. Just for a little background, we're just wrapping up or we just wrapped up design for Ben Franklin Transit for an expansion building on their site over there in the Tri-Cities. And we previously did some facility master plan work for the city of Moscow and their public works facility. So as we mentioned, our role on this transit facility planning project was really to look out 20 years and come up with a plan to understand what your existing facilities are, and then come up with a plan for what the, for the next 20 years hold for you. We worked closely with our civil engineer, Alta Science and Engineering out of Moscow, Idaho. So they really dug into the site-related items with the project. So quick agenda here, and kind of overall, my plan is to kind of walk you all through what we've gone through and what we've discovered, and kind of what our kind of where we're at in the process, and maybe we can touch on kind of what the next steps are. So I'll work through all these main items here. These are kind of our main task items that we went through as part of our project. So looking at just understanding existing information, understanding your existing site, your buildings, and then getting into the needs analysis and understanding what your needs are for a transit agency looking out to the next 20 years. We developed a few site master plan concepts, and then of course we looked at costs. So that's always a big conversation when we're developing new facilities. Just to orient everyone, we have two aerials here. The one on the left is kind of just an overview of the city. You could see that dot there kind of towards the west side of the site here, or the city. That's where your current transit facility is located. So you have the the main north-south access, Grand, the east-west, Main Street, city of the main downtown area, WSU, the airport, and then the Moscow Pullman Highway. So the current Pullman transit site is kind of west of the city, within the city limits. Here on the right side, this is the transit site, and just to orient here a little bit, this is the Palouse River, kind of bordering the west side of the site. You have Guy Street, you have the treatment plant to the north, and then a hillside to the east. So this red dashed line here is the main transit facility site, and I will say that the site does share this overall site with maintenance and operations. So this rectangle building here is maintenance and operations main building. The red outline building is Pullman Transit. This is where they have their administrative and drivers area, and then enclosed bus parking. To the south of that, this is vehicle maintenance, or ERD, and then further beyond that is just some miscellaneous storage buildings. And then even further south is the fuel structure that was recently completed within the last several years. So in general, that's kind of the lay of the land of your existing facility. These are some photos of the site. In the upper left here, this is the vehicle maintenance building. Further below that, this is maintenance and operations, the Palouse River, and then to the right of that, these are all the Pullman Transit facility buildings. This building is the main entry. This is where the public visitors come in. This is also where the drivers and staff access the Pullman Transit building. These are the exterior of the overhead doors where the buses pull in and out of. Down here in the lower right, this is just an example of some of the existing buses that are parked outside. And then here towards the center, this is where the crew for the entire site are parked. Here's a few interior photos of the transit facility. Upper left, this is the driver's break room, kitchenette. One thing we'll talk about is just very undersized. Here in the middle is the dispatch area. There's a few lockers out here. And then beyond that, this is all the bus parking areas. You have a vehicle wash, and then you'll see here in the bottom right, this is where the first of two bus chargers are located and installed. When we were out here on site, the third one was still in the box, but I believe they're up to 3 chargers on site currently. And you can see they kind of shoehorned them in where they could within the existing building. So as we mentioned, the building was built in 1986. There's been a couple of additions over the years and remodels. One of the issues that we found when we were on site is the public can enter the building, and they're basically coming right into the driver's area. So there's no separation. So there's kind of a lack of maybe security and separation there between the public and Pullman Transit. So I mentioned earlier that we got our civil engineer involved pretty heavily. We wanted to understand the existing site, because one of the things that we always try to do is when we're master planning, developing a new facility, we want to try to utilize the existing property as much as we can and within reason. So one of the big things that we wanted to look at was to understand any flooding concerns, and there are flooding issues, at least from a mapping standpoint on site. So one of the colors here is red, so that's considered the floodway, which I'll get into a little bit more here detail in just a second. The blue is a 100-year floodplain area. It might be a little hard to see on here, but this dashed line is the site for Pullman Transit maintenance operations. This black outline is the Pullman Transit facility. So you can see here, the majority of the existing site is within the 100-year floodplain level with these FEMA maps. Now we did come up with some additional information towards the end of our study, which I'll go into here in a little bit. But at least for this initial discussion, we're going to work with the flood maps that we have here, and kind of just use these as discussion purposes. So the floodplain obviously is a big concern. Essentially, if you want to develop within a 100-year floodplain, any commercial buildings, you need to raise the building to be above that flood level, at least by 1 foot. So that's one consideration when needing to develop on an existing site. Developing within the floodway, and now these regulations are per the City of Pullman regulations, so these are all following current guidelines. Developing within the floodway, you basically have to do several calculations and prove that your development is not impacting the floodway. So you can't raise the flood elevation because of your new development. So there's a lot of issues that can come up with trying to develop within a floodway. So that's putting aside developing next to a river and concerns with flooding. Just if you were to do it, there's just a lot of considerations that you have to take into account when you're developing, and these can be costly. They can be difficult to do. For example, you have to raise the buildings 1 foot above the floodplain. You would have to, if you don't do that, you can keep it at the same level as the existing site, but you would have to flood-proof the building. So essentially make it so that if there was a flooding event, that flood waters will not get inside the building. Or you can create certain areas of the building where you basically allow the flood water to come into the building, and then once the flood waters recede, the building is allowed to dry out. And so those would typically be spaces that are not finished, like offices or things like that. So, not a lot of fun things to think about when you're trying to develop in a floodplain. From a zoning standpoint, developing on this existing site, there's no issues. Setbacks don't seem to be an issue. Stormwater can be difficult when you're developing a floodplain. So those are all things that we kind of touched on and went into a good amount of analysis to understand. So back to transit and their program needs. So we went through a couple exercises looking at staffing and vehicles. We wanted to understand current staffing needs, which currently there are about 43 in total. We always want to try to project out at least 20 years. This is a best guess estimate at this point, looking out 20 years, a lot of changes, a lot of things can happen. But based on everything that we could come up with and talking with transit staff, we have assumed that transit will increase from 43 total staff currently up to about 61. Now, and a big number of that are in drivers, which would go from 30 to about 40. Transit vehicles, currently there are, for revenue vehicles, there are 30, 25 buses and 5 paratransit, and that's projected to go to about 38. Non-revenue vehicles and staff parking currently is about 51, and we're projected to go to 65. So for building program, here's a table where it shows the existing. So you'll get a sense of the existing Pullman transit facilities, so about 2,700 square feet in admin operations, and then just over 11,000 square feet of enclosed vehicle and parking. And then, so we went through a pretty extensive programming process where we, as Wayne mentioned, we met on site for a couple days, met with transit staff to try to understand what their needs are. And what we developed out of those conversations was basically a need of more than double the existing program or building square footage. So there's quite a bit of need there, and I think, from looking at some of those existing facility photos, if all the vehicles were in there, you would get a sense for just how crammed and how jam-packed the existing facilities are when there's people and buses in there. And so with this new facility program area, it would make it, allow transit to expand or grow over the next 20 years and, really bring it up to par with kind of other transit agencies in the local area. One thing which I'll touch on here in a little bit as well, we do have another column here that has some asterisks. One of the things that we looked at is if we needed to move the transit facilities to a new site. And so if we do that, there's a need to bring on vehicle maintenance and vehicle fueling to an existing site because it will be remote from the current city facility site. And so that's just an inefficiency. If you have vehicle maintenance on site with transit vehicles, you're not having to shuffle them back and forth between facilities. And so we made the assumption that if the facilities do go to a new site, that we would have some additional building needs for vehicle maintenance and for vehicle fueling. And so that is why the square footage for this last column is higher than the middle column there. So getting to some site concepts, I'll just touch on these, and we can come back to them if you have questions. But we did review all of these with transit staff, so there's been some amount of review. And again, this is still a high-level study, so we didn't go into extreme detail. This is really just giving us the information we need to know where the project is going to head, and then we can look at the next steps from a design and funding standpoint. So just to orient you here on the site, so this is the existing site. Again, see here, here's the Palouse River, the existing MNO site, Guy Street on the top of the page here. So what we were looking at is what can we do if we expand and remodel the existing transit facility? So that's what this blue color is here. We're expanding the administrative areas to accommodate the program needs that we developed. And then this lighter blue or teal color is enclosed vehicle parking. We added additional space for enclosed bus parking. But what this is trying to do is trying to limit the amount of new buildings and existing spaces that we needed to develop. One issue, or I should say a lot of issues come up with this, and what we want to do, we wanted to develop this just so we know how the existing facilities will look, and if we could really remodel and kind of use the existing. I think we decided pretty quickly that this just really is too crammed for the sites. Maintenance and operations, it really constrains their ability to do work outside of their building. The flow of the vehicle traffic just really isn't up to what we would consider a new transit facility. Next, well, what can we do if we develop on the south side of the site where there's essentially kind of underutilized space? There's some existing storage buildings that were repurposed at some point in time for storage, for city storage. So we thought, well, let's bring all of transit program to the south of the site, or the right side of the site. So we have a new transit operations building. We have a new fully enclosed vehicle parking building, new wash facility, and it's all together. And the nice thing about this is that it kind of divides the transit operation from the maintenance and operation site. So the maintenance and operation can remain north, and the transit can remain south. One thing I forgot to point out here is this dash line on the top of the page. That is the 100-year floodplain from those maps that I showed earlier, and then this orange color is the floodway. So you can see here that these new facilities that we were possibly looking at is within the floodplain. It's within the 100-year floodplain. So there are a lot of issues there. With this development to the south, we're out of the floodway, which is good, but we're still within that 100-year floodplain. So there's still concerns with that. And then just another variation on developing to the south. So further beyond that, we looked at a generic site layout. If we had the ideal site that was flat, there was no issues with any environmental concerns, what would be the ideal layout for one of these new facilities with our program? So we developed two ideas. One is a narrow concept on the left, the other is kind of more of a wider concept. And what we wanted to do was use these as a means to, when we're looking for potential new sites, help us understand the site requirement needs. And so if we have two options, we have a little variation on the site, a potential new site shape that we could use and develop. So what we determined is we need approximately 5 to just over 6 acres if we were to look for a new site. We also looked at some floor plans for the admin operations building, and I will say that these plans were not fully reviewed by transit staff. So these are just concepts to get us kind of an idea of square footage that the admin and operations building would need. So again, kind of two variations. One is more of a square, and the other is rectangular shape. Again, this is accommodating all of the driver operations and administrative needs. So offices, more of a secure lobby where the public's not just coming right into the space. A separate driver's lounge, separate kitchen and break room, something that the drivers currently don't have. And this would be sized to accommodate kind of the 20-year program that we developed. And then a nice full locker room that's separate from the toilet rooms. However, there'd be separate toilets and showers. So just a much more kind of modern, today's standard in transit operations, accommodations and layouts. So as I mentioned earlier, as part of our study, we did looking at for new sites. Just understanding, with all the flooding concerns on the existing site with the current FEMA flood maps, we wanted to look at what opportunities were out there for new sites. So you see here, we did look at 10 sites. This does not include the existing site. So essentially what we did is we went out, toured the city, kind of just looked around, and try to find sites that seem to be the appropriate size to fit our generic site concepts. However, we did not go into extensive detail on ownership or things like that. So this is just, again, high level, what's out there. And from what we found, there weren't a lot of, or I should say there weren't really any sites out there that were currently for sale that could accommodate our facility. So at least at the time of this study, which was several months ago when we were doing this piece, there just weren't any sites out there that were actively for sale and available that would accommodate our site. But we still wanted to, look at the sites that we found as potentials and go through a process where we would score and rank the potential sites. And so we went through an extensive exercise with transit staff looking at these different sites. We took a scoring matrix and we did a weighting process. We have, I think there's about 15 or 16 categories of, like site access, site size, any environmental concerns for each of these sites. We did a 1 to 3 weighting factor, which is basically saying the importance of each of those criteria. And then we put a score of 1 to 5 to each of those. And what it came up with was a score for all of the different sites. And we wanted to narrow it down to 2. And so you can see we highlighted the 2 sites, site 1 and site 6 as the highest scoring sites. And so site 1 and 6 kind of more in the northern areas of the city. Again, we didn't go into a ton of detail on those sites. We just wanted to see if we were in the realm of reality of, could we make this facility work? And so I think a next phase, if we go this direction, would be to really start to investigate and understand in detail, what these sites have for a potential new facility. So, again, within a couple months prior to our presentation here today, we were made aware of some potential new draft FEMA flood maps. And so this came really late in the game after we went through all of the information that I presented to you just now, where FEMA has actually gone out and remapped the Blues River and lots of other waterways around the area. And they have draft new flood maps based on new information, new criteria. And so they have actually changed where the floodway and the 100-year floodplain is on the existing city operations site. So I think, with all the information I just talked about, it's all still relevant and still, I think, important to this conversation. But, now knowing that there is a potential that the flood boundaries are going to change based on new information and new measurements, I think it opens up the existing site to new development potential for Pullman Transit. So I don't have the 2 maps side by side to compare, but you can see here, again, the Pullman Transit building type is outlined in black. The red, again, was the floodway. You can see now that it's not overlapping the existing building, and it's not even coming onto the site. The 100-year flood, again in blue, only comes onto the site in a couple areas, but it's very minimal. And then the one thing that they did add was a 500-year floodplain. And this does come onto the site, but from what we could tell from looking through the development code, there's really little to no development concerns when developing within a 500-year floodplain. So based on that new flood information, flood mapping information, and again, just to preface it, it is still draft development. It's in review, and I think there's a commenting phase for the public. But what this does is, so this orange line, this is the new flood boundary for the 100-year floodplain. So you can see it really opens up the site to potential development. Again, when just looking at it from a flood perspective. So I think from the city operations continuity aspect, it's nice, with the new information to really keep the existing, all of the city operations facilities on one site. So, understanding that flooding is not a concern, still in draft form, but the potential that flooding is no longer a concern, I think really wants us to look at this existing site for future development. Again, there's no flood-proofing requirements. There's no need to raise the buildings up to get out of the floodplain because the new maps, basically comes out of the floodplain. So there's a lot of benefits to developing on this existing site. So cost, and I know I'm going here a little long, so this is the last slide here. So what we did is we did develop costs for 4 different options. So the new sites, site 1 and 6, we looked at costs, and so these cost numbers are just total construction costs, including soft costs, which is taxes, permitting, design fees. However, they do not include site acquisition costs, or if there's any other environmental costs that are required. So we looked at the 2 sites, and you can see these numbers are getting up to the low $40 million range. A lot of this has to do with grading. As we all know, a lot of the sites around Pullman, there's a lot of hills, so there's a lot of grading, retaining walls that need to happen. So that's really what is adding up to create these high numbers. Also, the duplicate fuel structure and vehicle maintenance buildings, as I mentioned earlier. If we go to a new site, we really need to add those program items to those facilities. We did a cost estimate on the generic flat site. Again, just if we didn't have to deal with grading, if we didn't have to deal with retaining walls, what would we look at? You can see this getting into the high 20s and low $30 million range. And again, site acquisition costs are not included in that. And then further, if we were to redevelop on the existing site, it has a lot of the utilities. It's generally a flat site. It's a site that the city already owns. So there's a lot of benefits to that. We don't have to develop duplicate vehicle maintenance and fuel structures because it's already there on site. And of course, again, this presumes that the draft FEMA maps are approved at some point. So with that, I know I kind of just blew through a lot of information, so hopefully that all made sense, and I think we can open it up if there are any questions, or if there's anything you'd like to go into a little more detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know you're soliciting council feedback on the plan, so Becky, we'll go to you first.
First of all, thank you this is so in-depth and together. Thank you so much for doing that. For the FEMA, the updated FEMA maps, do we have any idea of the timeline on that approval?
I do not at the moment. That's something that we can look into and try to understand more.
Yeah, it would be ideal, obviously, because I believe the existing site, the price estimate you have there, it comes closest to what we have in the TIP, which is, I think is 21 million or 20.1 or something in that range.
Yeah, it's really close.
Really close to it. Thank you.
Other comments? Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo what Councilmember Dubin said. This is really in-depth. Impressive presentation. I had a question regarding, when we're looking at Site 1 versus Site 6, the original site that we have currently has, and correct me if I'm wrong, little traffic, but I'm looking at Site 6. Coming out of Site 6 will have quite a bit of traffic, I would say. And so is that figured into any of the discussion?
I'll comment on that, Mark. We're
Okay,
actually looking at one point for a location that would be along a route. One of the benefit to the public having access to buying passes, lost and found, Terraview and Albion Road, I believe, are the feeders to 1 and 6. Traffic flow would be a challenge. Staying at the existing site did not have route access for the public, but it had a lot more to offer. But yeah, either one of those would probably require traffic control measures, signal lights.
Francis?
Thank you. I really appreciate Councilmember Dubin's comments because I really feel that for the price-wise, if we can keep the same site and if with FEMA, if that works, that'd be the best. I would like a clarification. You have 2 circles for Site 7, and I'm wondering, is it the right circle or the left circle for Site 7?
It was
Yeah, good call.
a pair. I believe that is part of the North Pullman bypass interchange. So one side or the other would have been available.
Considerable savings just to stay where you're at. And I know Kara's probably been checking to find out when the FEMA thing becomes public, but they have discussed it. I know we've heard about it. It was really great news when we heard that they're going to be revising the plan. We may actually know sometime tonight, but we'll find out later on that. Any other comments? Okay. All right.
Okay, so we will take these details, incorporate them into an actual report, and bring it back to you for acceptance. And that'll be our guiding document as we move into the grant seeking and potential construction phase.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. Next on the agenda is the public comment period. Persons may comment on any agenda item the City Council will take final action on, including consent agenda, but excluding items where public comment was previously accepted. We have a planned residential development tonight. They have already taken public comment on that, and that includes prior public hearings. Is there anyone who would make any public comment? Anything that we're taking tonight is final action. Seeing none, we'll move along. We now move to the consent agenda. These items are considered routine in nature. Do I hear a motion to read by title only?
Second.
Move and second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, Thad, you've got a long agenda tonight to read.
Alrighty. The first item, a motion to dispense with the reading of the June 27, 2023 meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item number 2, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to sign and execute pending Pullman Transit's operating grant agreements for 2023 to 2025 and 2025 to 2027. Item 3, a motion to accept an amendment to Transit Grant Agreement PTD 0237, changing the ending date of the agreement to June 30th, 2025, and authorizing the mayor to sign the amendment agreement. Item 4, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to execute a pending WSDOT transit support grant for 2023 to 2025. Item 5, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to sign and execute a pending WSDOT paratransit / special needs formula award for 2023 to 2025. Item 6, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to execute a pending WSDOT sales tax equalization formula award for 2023 to 2025. Item 7, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to sign and execute a pending Pullman Transit 2023 to 2025 capital grant contract for the purchase of 1 electric bus and charger. Item 8, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to execute a pending Pullman Transit Dial-A-Ride operating grant agreements for 2023 to 2025 and 2025 to 2027. Item 9, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to sign and execute a pending Pullman Transit 2023 to 2025 service expansion grant agreement for transit service to the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. Item 10, a motion authorizing the mayor and city attorney to sign and execute a pending Pullman Transit 2023 to 2025 capital grant contract for for the purchase of 2 electric buses and chargers for use and service to the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. Item 11, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 110831 through 110854, totaling $164,053.63. Item 12, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 110855 through 110862 and 110935, electronic transfers 115, 116, and 1024 through 1028, payroll direct deposits numbered 86020 through 86353, totaling $1,022,477.43. Item 13, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 110863 through 110934, totaling $1,500,146.44. Item 14, a motion to approve the transfer of sales tax revenue to CIP Reserve Fund for 2023 Q2 in the amount of $395,359. Item 15, a motion authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Specialty Pump, Inc. of Spokane, Washington to replace the water pump and motor at well number 6. Item 16, resolution number R-30-23, a resolution adopting proposed route changes to the public transportation system effective August 20, 2023 for the 2023-2024 service year. Item 17, resolution number R-31-23, a resolution authorizing the acceptance and execution of a universal transit access pass program agreement with the City of Pullman and Washington State University for the 2023-2024 school year. And finally, item 18, resolution number R-32-23, a resolution authorizing the execution of a professional services agreement between the City of Pullman and CWA Consultants, PS, for professional plan review services.
Is there any item the council would like for discussion? Seeing none, the consent agenda consists of items 1 through 18. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And thank you, Thad, for going through those 18 items. We move to our regular agenda. We have an ordinance before you right now. We've had a good discussion on this at the last council meeting when we had the American Legion here, and we talked about the Veterans Park. So with that, this is ordinance 2312, and here's R.J. Lott to talk about it.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Back on June 27th, 2023, at a Metropolitan Parks District meeting, members of the American Legion made Price Post 52 presented a very generous donation of $25,000 to kick off the fundraising to construct Veterans Park. According to Pullman City Code 4.05020, donations exceeding $20,000 must be accepted via an ordinance by the City Council. So at this time, City staff recommends adopting the attached ordinance and accepting the generous donation. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Do I hear a motion on this?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor, I'll read the ordinance again, 2312, accepting restricted monetary contributions from the American Legion, Maynard Price Post 52 of Pullman to the City of Pullman to be used for the construction of the Veterans Park. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I knew there wouldn't be any hesitation in taking money, okay? Item number 2 is a resolution accepting a bid of Motley & Motley. This is something that Kirk Damon went over when we did our discussion of the Metropolitan Park, talking about Mary's Park, and also talking about some of the complications with that bid process. Kara Haley is our city engineer.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. As noted, I'm here tonight to talk about the Mary's Park parking lot project. So, this project consists of installing an asphalt parking lot and related features at Mary's Park, which is located off Johnson Avenue on the southeast edge of town. On the screen, you should be able to see a site plan exhibit conveying the overall project intent. Project work involves approximately 890 cubic yards of excavation, including haul, 260 tons of asphalt paving, and 1,050 tons of crushed surfacing placement and compaction. Striping and signage is required after paving to develop 28 parking stalls, 4 of which will be ADA van accessible. Installation of utilities and miscellaneous other plumbing work is also included in this project to support future installation of a prefabricated restroom. The restroom itself is being ordered and basically customized by the Parks Department, and that will be installed at a later date under a separate contract, or really separate from this contract. Other contract work includes construction of concrete curb, biofiltration swale, inclusion of temporary erosion and sediment control measures, and landscape restoration. So bids for this project were opened on June 27, 2023. The low bidder is Motley Inc. It was our only bid on this project. So the bid is approximately $29,000 over the engineer's estimate, which equates to 11.2% percentage points. We did provide a bid summary in the council packet for reference. Staff performed an in-depth analysis of the proposal and found that bid prices are fairly comparable, but slightly high, or I guess bid and the engineering prices are fairly comparable, but slightly higher overall due to construction inflationary pressures that are still occurring in the industry. The bid is deemed responsive and the bidder to be responsible. So next steps. Staff recommends council adopt resolution R3323 as presented, awarding the contract to Motley Inc. for the amount bid. Funding will be from the Parks and Paths bond that was approved by voters in February of 2018. If approved tonight, next steps will be issuing notice of award to Motley, followed by notice to proceed once appropriate paperwork has been returned and the contract officially executed. On-site work would be expected to start as soon as mid-August, but must start up no later than September 18th of this year. Work is expected to extend into the fall, with the parking lot itself likely to be constructed and operational within roughly a 1-month time frame. During that time, the Parks Department will fully close the playground and secure temporary fencing, so it would not be open to the public. Oops, I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself. Plumbing work and utility installations, which were on that first exhibit, they're actually located outside the parking lot footprint, and so those are expected to be completed after the parking lot is constructed and operational, and we would plan to reopen the playground for that portion of the work. Flexibility is incorporated into the contract in regards to this particular work, as shallow bedrock is prevalent in the project vicinity and expected to dictate the overall project timeline. At this time, based on estimated rock extents and conditions, the entire project is expected to be complete in mid-November, and I will take questions.
Any questions or comments on this? And again, we had a pretty good discussion of that from the Metropolitan Park District when Kirk was here. So if I don't see questions, do I hear a motion on this?
Move to adopt resolution R33-23.
Moved and second. Thad, do you want to read the resolution? I figured I'd give you a break the last one after you did 18, so that's why I picked that up. But
I
want to make
appreciate
sure
it.
you know that you're there as a city attorney, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, I need a little rest. So it's resolution number R-33-23, a resolution accepting the bid of Motley Inc. for the Marys Park parking lot project and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? And thank you.
Your Honor, I was going to see if you want an update on the FEMA timeline?
Yes.
Is this an
Yep.
okay time to
See
do
ya.
that?
Fresh information here. That's what we
Okay.
like to hear.
I pulled up an email, came in just a couple weeks ago, in terms of the process. FEMA actually started remapping in 2009, just a little backstory. So that was their original scoping meeting. In 2015, they actually released different draft maps. There was quite a bit of public comment, input, feedback, and that really kind of stayed where it was until 2020. So far, we've got a pretty long timeline. But I can speak in the last few years, there's been a lot more progress. They flew LiDAR data to get a lot better topographic data in the region. So old maps are based off of USGS contours, which are super coarse. 2022, after some comments that we provided them, they actually did some field survey work in Pullman to get a lot of crossings and things a lot more accurate. And they did a detailed hydrologic and hydraulic study update. So a pretty significant revamp from 1978, which was the last time the maps were developed. The draft flood maps that I think were probably referenced in the study came out in October 2022. There was a meeting that was held earlier this year to talk about comments on those. We provided comments back and forth some. Things are still ongoing. As we speak, I think I was chatting with Clayton just earlier this week about some comments on some updated things that have come back. It sounds like in February of 2024, they plan to release the preliminary, basically, flood insurance study maps. They do have big asterisks that say subject to change for everything beyond this point. And then I see they have a couple meetings scheduled in kind of the first quarter of 2024 with a public meeting and workshop penciled in June of 2024. And then it doesn't say what the comment period is after that, but I think there's also a period in which they have to address those comments. So probably in 2025, if not a little bit later, before those become fully effective. So anyway, that's all I know.
Okay. But sometimes the comment period is 90 days, and they respond, and they might actually do it in 24. Who knows? Well, that's your update. Fresh news around here. Okay. With that, we now go to item number 3, a resolution approving the West End Villas Planned Residential Development Preliminary Plan. But first, we will do the appearance of fairness questions, and we're going to start with Becky tonight. So does any member of this council have any knowledge of having conducted business with either the proponents or opponents of this proceeding?
No.
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 So I don't know if this is the right time to just say that I did meet with a constituent about this project. It was last fall, and it was to just simply look at the site, and it was control at that point.
Okay. Question number 2. Has any member of this council communicated with a proponent or opponent regarding the proposal that is subject to this proceeding?
No.
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 Yes, I was contacted by a resident in the affected area,
Okay.
and I answered them, and that was all.
Megan?
Same case, same.
Okay. So just leave your mic on. Number 3, any member of this council have either a financial or personal interest in the outcome of this proceeding?
No.
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 Does any member of this council know whether or not their employer has a financial interest in this matter or has an interest in the outcome of this proceeding?
No.
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 Does any member of this council live or own property within 300 feet of the area which is subject to this proceeding?
No.
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 Does a member of this council have any special knowledge about the substance or merits of this proceeding, which would or could cause the council member to prejudge the outcome of this proceeding?
No.
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 Is there a member of the council who believes that he or she cannot sit and hear this matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of the proponents and the opponents of this proceeding?
No.
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 Is there any member of the audience who, because of the appearance of fairness doctrine, wishes to disqualify any member of the council from hearing this matter? And if so, please state the name of the council member and the reason or reasons why you believe that member should be disqualified because of the appearance of fairness doctrine. Look at the audience. I see no one standing up. With that, we now have the appearance of fairness questions done. It's R.J. Lott.
Thank you again, Aaron. Good evening, council. This item is the preliminary plan for West End Villas Planned Residential Development. The proposal is to divide approximately 5.26 acres into 65 lots. The vicinity map is on the screen in front of you now. It's located north of Pullman High School, south of Terraview Drive, and east of Valley View Drive on Military Hill. The PRD includes construction of 60 townhomes, 4 lots for open space, and 1 lot for a private road. The current zoning designation for this location is R2, low-density multifamily residential. The R2 zoning district allows for a maximum density of 15 units per acre. This location was annexed into the city in the mid-1980s and has been zoned R2 since annexation. A planned residential development allows for flexibility and creativity in the layout and design of new residential developments. This planned residential development did go through site plan committee on May 30th, 2023, and had 45 recommended conditions. Those 45 recommended conditions are outlined in the staff report. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this item on June 28th, 2023. The Planning Commission voted unanimously in favor of a recommendation of approval of this item to the City Council. At that public hearing on June 28th, numerous individuals spoke against this proposal. They cited traffic, parking, and neighborhood character as their chief concerns. Attached are draft Planning Commission minutes from that meeting, and they summarized those concerns. Also in the staff report as attachment Q, written comments that were received prior to the Planning Commission meeting are also included. I'd be happy to answer any questions about this project.
Questions? Okay. First of all, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I read through those opponents. There was a lot. The traffic, I want to bring up mine real quick because I do have a few. One of the major ones, as you had already mentioned, is the traffic. Now, from what I read, you said it would be able to handle that additional. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I read somewhere in the document that's 210 to 250 additional people in that area.
Correct.
Okay. And let me also ask, is there a way, I know one of the comments mentioned increased speed near Kamiak. If this goes through, is there a way for traffic calming measures to be placed there, either signs with the police department regarding speed? I think some of the streets have the narrowing occurring, but then there's the challenge of fire and so on and so forth. So what would be your suggestions to address these concerns?
Sure. 2 things. There currently is a sign near Kamiak Elementary that shows speed via radar. So it does project onto the sign the vehicle's speed. The second item is that Public Works reviewed this proposed PRD and determined, based on the number of units, the existing infrastructure, the classification of roads, and other items, that a traffic study would not be required. So as a result of that, there were no traffic calming measures required or suggested by Public Works staff.
Okay, what would constitute a traffic study to be done?
That is a great question. So I asked Public Works staff that question exactly because I anticipated it coming up. Mm-hmm. So it's based on a wide variety of variables, pretty much what I mentioned: the number of average daily trips that were to be expected, the existing infrastructure, meaning the condition of the roadways, the width of the roadways, the connections that exist within the area. So there are a number of factors that would either require or not require a traffic study. So there is no, in simple terms, there is no single metric or single line that would require or not require a traffic study.
So can we, as a council, indicate that we would like a traffic study to occur?
Yes. So your options, the council's options for this evening, are to approve, deny, or you could remand it to staff or to the Planning Commission and ask for such a study, such as a traffic study, and evaluate that at a later time. So those are your general options at this point.
Okay. I will just say I am interested in that option, but it takes the rest of the council to agree on that, so I'll leave that up to them. The other questions are more general as far as the development checklist. Now, I noticed there's a few access to transit and so on. I think a mile away for the route is a bit far for some people to walk, but I did notice that that might change depending on future needs. What I would like to see, if it's possible in the future, is access to food and groceries. So some sort of item in there indicating food is X amount of miles away from this location. And the reason I bring that up is because, of course, with Dismore's gone currently, we have a significant food desert. And I know that's felt by students in apartment land. And so I'd like to see if we can possibly do that, and maybe this is something offline that we'll have to discuss, to put that on the development checklist, if that's okay. All right. And the other question I had is, I see over the years a lot of, we have the comments of affected departments, and consistently I see we have no comments from people, except of course from our own departments. But Palouse Land Trust, Avista, these sorts of things, often go blank. And I'd like to ask, how many times do we reach out? Is it once? Is it twice? Because some of these things, especially if we're going into farmland, Palouse Land Trust, it would be good to get their input, especially because one of the comments did discuss entomology. So can you answer that?
Yes, so we have our standard list of departments that we reach out to. Additionally, anybody is welcome to comment on any proposal that we have. So we may not reach out individually to a group such as the Pullman Land Trust or the Palouse Conservation District or anybody like that, but they're always welcome to comment on any project that we have.
Okay, is there a way, and again, this is future scope, so I'm looking at this, that we can do more of an active engagement? So ask them, say, this development is coming up. We would love your input. Instead of it's here, comment if you like. So is that something that maybe we could do? Absolutely.
We're always welcoming comments, whether they're from the public or other agencies. We often do reach out to a certain interested level of parties or of groups, whether they're county agencies or state agencies. And quite often, we simply don't hear anything back. So after a certain period of time of not hearing any back, we make the conclusion that perhaps they're not interested in these type of projects. But you're absolutely correct. Reaching out to all of the agencies, at least as initial point of contact, is always a great idea.
Okay. Very last question. So I know this is geared towards mid-range cost homes. That's what it said in the application. Can you give me an idea? I know especially affordable housing, this is something that Megan has been very, a champion for. I'd like an idea. What is our Pullman's idea of mid-range homes versus like affordable homes?
Yeah, so really what affordable housing generally boils down to is 1/3 of someone's income or less. So that can mean any number of things to anybody. The applicant and the proponent developer did not specifically identify what the proposed cost of each unit would be. So to say that these would necessarily fall into a certain range is a little difficult at this point, especially with the cost of materials being very volatile up end. But yes, this would, in theory, provide more affordable units based on merely the size of the units.
And you can see how popular towns were there on Walk Drive As soon as they built them, were immediately occupied, and people had a chance to become that starter home for them. So Eileen, you're next, and then
Yeah, RJ, this is kind of an unfair question. I'm going to ask it anyway, and you can pass if that would feel appropriate. About the traffic, I realize there's a lot of balls in the air when you start talking about it, whether we need a traffic study. So did this not need a traffic study by a wide margin or by a narrow margin?
Yeah, I'll take your offer to pass. I'm not a traffic engineer.
Okay.
So I don't know where that fell. I don't know if it was close or if it was not close at all. So I couldn't answer that with any level of certainty.
I would like to pursue a level of certainty of some sort on that. This is a lot of units, and that's a lot of people moving in and out of this particular neighborhood. I'm not comfortable with there not being a traffic study, but I'm not sure how we can reasonably resolve that within the developers. There's a lot of problems, challenges there. I want to make sure we do this right the first time, but I don't want to just analysis paralysis either. And the other thing too is it follows up sort of on some of Nathan's comments. Do we have any idea what the cost per square foot is at the present time? I'm hearing $150 per square foot to build new construction, and that does not include the cost of the land. So what's our guesstimate on the square footage of these units? And that would give us a number. I realize podium math is always dangerous, but.
Yeah, I don't have the average square footage of each unit in front of me at the moment, but I think estimate's probably fairly accurate at that price per square foot. Like I said, there are a number of variables that can vary wildly, including the cost of lumber, concrete, steel, availability of construction staff assemble the structures. So to estimate a guess would be difficult.
Eileen?
Thank you.
May I? Well, I'm sorry, it's an answer. Yeah. In the presentation, there are some mock-ups of the floor plans, and it says total square footage 1523.
Okay. I missed that. Thank you, Ann. Whoa.
I don't,
That certainly would help.
Okay,
That
thank
matter.
you.
Thank you, Ann. Megan, you're next.
Thank you, RJ. Councilmember Nathan Weller said he was concerned about, the affordability piece, and that is something that our housing group is looking at. It does become tough to, when you don't have all those variables, and to say, is this going to be affordable? But our recent housing action plan just said that in addition to affordable housing, we need middle housing, and that is typically defined as townhomes, amongst other kinds of houses. But townhomes is what this particular developer is looking at developing. There's also a need for what I would call like retiree-type housing, where folks are looking to downsize and not have the big yards, and they're coming here because their grandchildren are here, or they want to continue to live in Pullman, but they don't want to keep up the big house. Those are in need. And so, this developer, what he's proposing and what the development is proposing does meet that need. I realize that some other things come with it around growth, like traffic, like water consumption with more people. But the Housing Action Plan also did say that in the next 27 years, 2040 basically, that we'll need 10,000 additional housing units in Pullman to keep up with projected growth. I don't know what that translates to perfectly, is that townhomes or apartments, et cetera. My feeling is we have plenty of apartments, and people are looking for more of this middle type housing and starter homes. And we want to keep people here in Pullman who are looking for that kind of housing but are currently going somewhere else. So those are the concerns or the things that I'm seeing. The other question is, do we have any control over whether this housing will be for ownership or for rent? I don't believe we have any control over that. And my concern is that people feel there's almost a little bit of elitism going on in what I'm hearing about, we don't want renters in the neighborhood. My feeling is there's a school of thought that if people have something nice, they keep it nice. And I don't think we can start looking at, we don't want renters in R2 zones. So those are the things I have to say about it.
Okay, Franz?
Thank you. I appreciate Megan Guido's comments around the affordable house piece. That's something that is very much needed within our community. It sounds like a lot of our questions right now are centering around the traffic side. And I had a question when streets are being designed and built, so there were other developments that happened in this area. If you look at the other homes that are in the area, were the streets designed for just that amount of homes, or historically the street look at for this area of land and the number of homes that are eventually going to be here, the streets are more programmed for that? Do you know when we're looking at the size of street that we're required to be built, which are we looking at?
Sure. Question. Once again, I'm a traffic engineer, so that's my initial thought. Secondly, there are different classifications of roads. They vary from a collector to a residential street to an arterial. So it depends upon the designation of a road and what the predicted travel, average daily trips, on-street parking or not on-street parking, 1 lane or 2 lanes in each section. So to answer that, I think most of these streets on Military Hill are designed as residential streets, with the exception most likely to be Terraview. It's a little wider, can accommodate a little bit more traffic at a higher speed, but most of the other streets in this area are residential in nature.
Okay, so we don't know whether or not Terraview and the other streets were designed in anticipation for a full build-out of all the land. Is what I mean, is you have that knowledge because you weren't involved in the process. As a follow-up, is what I'm looking at is if we look at what the zoning code is for this area and then what's being proposed, they're actually proposing dwelling units that are larger per square feet than what is required by code as the minimum, which means you could actually by code put more units code on this than what's actually being proposed to be put on.
Yes, absolutely. So the underlying zone of R2 allows for 15 dwelling units per acre. There are provisions in our code for planned residential developments, which this is, to exceed 15 units per acre. This developer chose not to take advantage of those, what you could call bonus density options, and he stuck with the 15 units or less per acre. So at 5 1/4 acres and 60 townhomes, he's under the 15 units per acre by a substantial amount.
Okay. And that's the reason why there's so much more increase in green space on this compared to if it was single-family homes built there.
Right. PRD checked all of the boxes by zone. So the units per acre, the setbacks, the required open space, it checks all of the boxes, including parking. So staff made sure and included in the staff report, there's a map that has parking as one of those items that we took a closer look at to ensure that it met the standard in the zoning code.
Thank you.
Becky, and then we'll go to Pat.
Actually, I just wanted to make the point that Councilmember Benjamin did about the density, that actually quite a bit more could happen there. RJ, can you talk a little bit about the street? What would like street access? Would there be more access into that neighborhood or less? Do you know how that would? Or I know you're not a traffic engineer. I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yes, so it would, for locations north of Pullman High School, really is only one connecting east-west road, which is Terraview. And the proposed connection here would connect Northwest Valley View Drive essentially with Robert Street. So it would add a second through street in this location. So if there was an accident or some other road construction or something, there is an alternative way for folks to get to places such as Kamiak Elementary. So it does add a level of connectivity which previously would not exist.
Thank you. If we were to do a traffic study, how long would that take? What would that entail? Like, what kind of a stumbling block, if it would be a stumbling block?
So we would ask the applicant to provide a traffic study Once again, I don't know what that would entail specifically, or what kind of timeline that would require, or what the availability of a consultant would do to put that together. So
Okay.
it'd be a little difficult for me to estimate how long it would take.
Thank you.
Okay, Pat?
Thank you, RJ. I would just like to say that I concur wholeheartedly with the comments made by Megan Guido, because we are all concerned about affordable housing and the missing middle housing piece. And certainly, this would afford us an opportunity to see how that could really position itself in Pullman as a start. The two questions that I have are maybe additional comments. Number one, I think that we owe it to the residents that are currently there to look at what all of the mitigating factors are in their purview, that if we do a traffic study, would that help alleviate some of the concerns that they have, rather than just relying on what I would call anecdotal information? Because without a study, I mean, that's really all you have, or it comes from people at different levels and different, experiences. So that would be my recommendation. As Nathan indicated, he would be kind of looking at a remanding position on this, mainly for the traffic piece. And I know the other piece of that also revolves around the transportation aspect, but that is in parking. And I know citizens are always concerned about the parking issue. And I know there are going to be some regulations in this development should it go forward, but how do we ensure compliance there with those parking issues? And I think once you get the traffic out of the way, then the next need is that parking. And if we can't control the parking, then we've got issues continuing to build. And so I think if we're going to do something like this, we need to do it right the first time and make sure that we're addressing all of the concerns, both future as well as the concerns addressed by the current residents. So that would be my 2 cents. Thank you.
Just for background, and I know you're not the traffic engineer, you've made that very clear, but if it goes back or remands back to the Planning Commission or whatever, normally that's the developer's cost to do a traffic study.
Correct.
And it would be Public Works that would basically say, these are the 9 parameters we want to look at.
Yes, Public Works would be tasked with reviewing the traffic study, would be tasked with providing the parameters in which the traffic study would encompass. So that was where the traffic study would go to have further review.
And roughly, we're talking about what kind of a time frame, because I'm sure, as all developers know, that it costs money the more we delay. So I was wondering how long that time period would be.
To review, it doesn't take long. I'll speak on behalf of Public Works on this one. I would estimate about a week to 10 days to review. So it's not a lengthy process to review. To assemble, that I couldn't answer.
Okay. Okay, Ann.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm agreeing with everything that everybody said, and especially what Councilman Wright just said about, and I had that same thought, would a traffic study help the residents in that area understand? I have a question about, there was some information about an existing path. Do you know anything about it? The developer said he's pretty sure they're going to keep it, but do you have any more information about pedestrian and mobility?
Yes, great question.
Between the two schools especially?
Yes, so on the far east, or I should say the far southeast portion of this project, there are 2 existing gravel paths that connect to the north side of the softball field adjacent to the high school. The Pullman School District commented that they would like to see at least one of them preserved to keep a pathway for students to safely get to school. The developer acknowledged that during the Planning Commission public hearing, and said that they would indeed keep the far southeastern path, which would ensure continued pedestrian access to the school. So that is something that the developer acknowledged and said that he would keep.
Okay, thank you. And As far as green space that is planned, do we know, is there like anything planned within the development, a small green park or anything like that?
There is a landscaping general plan in your packet
Okay.
that does show where grasses would be planted in the open space. So there are
Okay.
plans for that as well.
Okay, and I'm with, it sounds like, well, where I'm at is, I think a traffic study would be helpful, because I feel like that's a big part of information that's missing when we're talking about 631 trips per day in and out of that neighborhood. That's a lot of load to add to an already, Terraview's already gotten very busy, of course, with the elementary school and the additional housing out there. So I do think that's quite impactful, and it would be worth looking more deeply into.
Eileen?
Thank you, Ann, for providing those numbers for us. Between your numbers and my numbers, I'm coming up with is $230,000 price tag on these units, give or take, obviously.
I have a feeling that might be a little low, but that's just me on it.
Well, some of the units are actually smaller
Yeah.
than what Ann indicated, so that would be a lower price then, because some of them were only 1,100 square feet, something like that, yeah, so,
But that would certainly help people get into a house
absolutely.
and start their down payment and something for future. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'm sort of hearing direction tonight, but we need to deal with this resolution before us. But we, again, you mentioned it can be sent back to the Planning Commission or sent back to Public Works for the traffic study. Just want to make sure it's clear and how best for the council to proceed on this.
At this time, from a consensus of what I'm hearing, I would suggest that the council remand this back to staff with the ask to have the applicant produce a traffic study and have it be reviewed by Public Works staff. And then we can bring that back to the council.
Do you need a motion on that? Probably would be in this particular case. Okay?
So, I forget, is there Sorry. So, yeah, the resolution would have to be denied or tabled, and then a motion to remand for the traffic study.
So basically it'd be tabled, wouldn't it be? Because we wouldn't,
Or you just deny it and then bring it back.
as long as that's in part of the motion, so it can come back. I just want to make sure it's not a done deal here, so. Okay. So you're recommending that this be denied with the condition that it's be remanded to, okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Now you've heard somewhat of a direction here. Do I hear a motion in that regard?
So moved.
I think we need to be a little bit more specific.
Well, I know, I
Yes.
thought we could get away with that. So I guess the motion would be to deny the resolution as presented here with ability to review after a traffic study has been completed. Do I need to do more than that?
Is that sufficient?
Maybe just a motion to conditionally deny the resolution pending completion of a traffic study.
Okay,
Just needed the word conditional.
okay, so I just say that that's what we want to do.
Okay.
We'll conditionally deny the resolution.
But sending back to staff for the
Staff.
traffic study.
Remanding
Yeah.
with remand for a traffic study.
Correct.
Second.
Okay, phew,
We've
that's
had a
easy.
second. We're not going to repeat it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay. That basically, on the next item, the preliminary plat, that should be same motion, Thad? Or do we just basically, yeah,
Yes.
okay. Item number 4, do I hear a motion on that? Pat, you've practiced it now, so why don't you just make the motion to remand back to the staff to deny the resolution, number 4.
Conditionally deny
Right.
the resolution to remand back to staff for traffic study as directed in the earlier resolution motion.
Second.
And I've got a second on that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. You've got direction. It's coming back to staff and traffic study. That's the summary. Okay.
Conditional.
Conditional, yes. All right. Now we're going to get into motorized scooters and bicycles. And of course, you've had a big presentation. We've had the group from WSU here, the Spin Group. We've actually heard them in a town gown collaborative meeting. And what we're basically looking now is some suggestions on updating our code to accommodate some of these things. And so with that, RJ, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council, again. This is a discussion item on motorized scooters and bicycles. Staff is looking for direction on this item. This is a discussion item for the use of motorized scooters and bicycles, both privately owned and perhaps commercially owned as well, in Pullman's parks, trails, as well as the central business district downtown. Current Pullman code, as it relates to motorized scooters and presumably bicycles, lies within Title 12. Chapter 12.11 talks about motorized foot scooters. So here's a brief summary on what that current title requires. So 16 years and older to operate on a public right-of-way. They need to obey all the rules applicable to a vehicle or bicycle or pedestrian. They're prohibited from being operated in the central business district. That's key. City parks, city bicycle paths, multi-purpose paths and walking trails, and any city street with a maximum speed limit of 25 miles per hour or greater. These can only be used during daylight hours. Helmets are required. There's no passengers or towing permitted. They need to have visible reflectors as required by the Washington State Patrol. There needs to be an engine kill switch and an unmodified muffle device. They cannot be operated in a manner that would endanger or likely endanger a person or property. They cannot obstruct, hinder, or impede lawful course of travel of any motor vehicle. And lastly, cannot obstruct, hinder, or impede the lawful use of any pedestrian of public streets, sidewalks, alleys, parking areas, pedestrian or bicycle trails, or public parks within the city of Pullman. So this is really pretty restrictive as it currently sits. In addition to Pullman City Code 12.11 is Pullman Code 12.10.070, which also refers to the use of these items on sidewalks. So that's not included in my presentation, but still part of the package, so to speak. You may have seen some of the commercial scooters and bikes in Spokane. Spokane has what they call Wheel Share, which is a shared mobility program between the city of Spokane and a commercial outfit called Lime. This allows for electric assist bikes and scooters to be checked out from the city for a fee. Scooters and bikes are automatically slowed to 7 miles an hour, if you're familiar with Spokane, in the riverfront park area, and 15 miles an hour in the Centennial Trail. Scooters are not permitted for use on sidewalks within the downtown business area and can incur a fine of $115. There's a defined difference between personal and rental transportation devices. If an individual is using wheel share transportation, helmet is not required, but if a person using personal transportation, a helmet is required. I found that quite interesting. It cannot be used personal transportation devices in parks unless otherwise stated in sidewalks, public trails, and certain streets. The company of Lime pays 75 cents for every vehicle that is operated to the city. Moving forward, quite simply, there's a buffet of options here. Some of the items to consider: temporarily suspend some of the items with Pullman City Code to allow for a trial period of electric scooters and bikes downtown, on sidewalks, on paths, in parks, restriction on maximum speed, create a fining system for some of these items that may be left in unauthorized areas. It may be wise to have the city council request a public hearing so that citizens can provide comments on an item like this. The last item to consider is the construction scheduled for late spring and summer downtown in the summer of, or next year in 2024. Scheduled construction roughly to begin May 7th. So available for questions, ready to take direction of City Council on what staff can do moving to go forward.
Okay, Megan, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, RJ. I'm really excited that this topic is being presented to City Council. I've sat through a couple of recent presentations by SPIN, which is the WSU outfit, or the outfit that WSU has contracted with and currently has the micro-mobility devices up on campus. First off, I want to say that it sends the wrong message when we have an ordinance that doesn't allow for this type of mode of transportation downtown and in other parts of our city when it's only confined to WSU. That isn't a welcoming message to our students and folks that are choosing to use this as a way of getting around our city when they're not allowed to come off campus. First thing I have to say. Second is we're living in a world now where there are more people who are using this type of these types of devices, micro-mobility, whatever you want to call them, and they've progressed so much from the time when this first ordinance and code was developed, I think back in 2004, 2006. This was brought to my attention when I first started on the council. I received a call from a young WSU vet student who had moved here from Montana to go to vet school and decided for economic reasons, but also for the environment, that she was going to bring her micro-mobility device to use for transportation. Made a choice to do that versus bringing a car, thinking that she could get around. And then, unfortunately, she was pulled over by the police because she was in violation of her code. And was pretty shocked about it and was concerned that, you know, this is how I'm going to get around. And I made an investment in this. And I think we have to look to the future, if not at least get ourselves into the present, and start allowing for these types of transportation when we've said as a city, in our comprehensive plan in Pullman 2040, that we want multiple ways of transportation and to be available. So we have to look at this code and we have to be flexible and look at these options.
Pat next, and then Ann follows that.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just also, since he's here, would like to give a shout out to Chris Bowen, who really kind of opened our eyes. I know a couple of town gown meetings ago in regard to how successful the program has been at WSU. So we have what, Chris, 9 months, almost a year now, maybe? About 6 months. Okay, and so it's been working well, and as Megan indicated, I think that it behooves us to extend that partnership down to downtown at least, because we're always crying for the students to come downtown, and yet given the mobility devices that they have that would enable them to get downtown, we're not able to provide that capability for them. So I think this really affords us a great opportunity to do that and determine if it works, great. I would suggest that suspending portions of the city code right now would be what we want to look at. I don't think we want to be initiating any new kinds of activities, for example, like creating a fine system for items that have been abandoned. We may want to do that, but not initially until we kind of get an idea of what we're looking at with this. But as far as actually initiating the program, I don't see many downsides to it. And again, if it encourages more business and more traffic into the downtown area of Pullman, I think we really need to seriously look at it. And again, thank you, WSU, for being the prototype here.
And then Nathan.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just say that I've lived in my home since 23 years, and in the last probably 2 years, I've seen a real increase in these devices going up and down my street. Scooters and like we used to call them mopeds, motorbikes, and regular commuters. I mean, I used to leave in the morning, see them come back in the afternoon, seeing them around town. So I do think, too, it's also look at the gas prices. I mean, if you're a college student or even you're working at SCL or downtown, I mean, it's very prohibitive right now to have a vehicle in many ways. So that's one thing. And then I do agree with Pat. I think just sort of let's ease it up a little bit and give it a test run, work with WSU. The provider at WSU has said that they haven't had problems with devices being left, and if they are left, they actually hire students who go and get them, and they seem to be pretty on top of that. I'm not aware that there's a problem with that, and I know that is a bit of a concern, but I think that's is a really good example of how they handle that. So I agree that I think worth trying to also be welcoming and say, hey, come on downtown, come on out to Mary Sellers or whatever it is, and use your mobile device. Thank you.
Nathan, then Eileen.
Ms. Mayor. I was just looking up what MRS had on some of the new laws. I'll just share my own personal story also, since Megan did. I was walking my dog just the other day. I was like, I don't know, about 85 degrees or something. And there's a girl riding from WSU on one of the scooters, and it cut off right outside, like just a bit down from Beasley. And she was so confused about what happened. I think part of the challenge with having restrictions, I think if we are going to have this, it's going to be tough for people to know if we restrict areas where they're restricted. And her having to lug this scooter back up, and it gave her warnings and everything, but she was on her headphones or whatnot. She had to lug it back into WSU. I agree. This is something that isn't coming. It's already here. I don't know how long it'll last. Some of these things kind of go in waves, and that type of thing. But I do think it's important for us to do. I think the challenge is, I was looking at, there's some new House bills saying nothing more than 15 miles an hour inside, on streets. I don't know if that's for us. I think the challenge for us is I don't personally ride a scooter. I don't think I could stay balanced on one. I really think we need to have public input, because I don't know if anybody else in this council rides one, but us making kind of decisions on this, I think we're operating from what we've heard, whether from Lime or from one of these other scooter things, or WSU, which is great, but I'd like to hear people who actually ride them, or what the challenges they have. I will say one thing. Being in Spokane, one of the biggest challenges, and I think we will face this here if we decide to go forward with this, is abandonment of these scooters. It's gonna happen. I know WSU is great about this, but I mean, I can guess, somebody gets, drunk downtown, Are they going to leave the scooter? What's going to happen, you know? And that's another thing, riding these when you're hammered. I'm pretty sure that's a moving violation. So these are some things that we've got to kind of look at. And if they are being abandoned, who's going to pay that fine? Is it going to be it's not going to be the person who abandoned it. I don't know if we could track them down. So maybe, you know, the people who we contract with, I'm not sure. One thing that Bothell did is they did a 90-day trial period with their contract, their program, Lime. So maybe that's something to consider as well. But I don't see how we can, just to reiterate, I don't see how we can restrict certain areas. It'll be way too confusing for people. And I do feel we need a public hearing, so.
It was nice to hear the difference between Lime and Spin. Spin really has some great controls. Lane, you're next.
Yeah, the study from Spokane that you provided was really good. These people thought of everything. They did a trial with Lime, 78-day trial. The amount of data they gathered was just awesome. It told them a lot of things. The abandonment issue, if they're abandoned, they come and pick them up. And then the person who abandoned them pays the freight. They've got your stuff on file. I mean, they've got your, and then what was also very impressive about it was, and I won't go into a whole lot of detail, they had outreach for low income and for people who do not have electronic means of paying. So those had also been taken into consideration. There was also some suggestion that sometime in the future that the 18-year age and under could be used for the transit that we've got already in place, could be meshed in with that, and they're looking at meshing it in with ORCA program in Spokane or Seattle. So yeah, this study that Tool Design did for Spokane, we should really be looking at that. They did a fantastic job. We don't need to reinvent this wheel. We do need to listen to our community. I would like to have a public meeting on this, but boy, this is required reading. They did a fantastic job, and then we can draw our own conclusions from there. The geofencing needs to be careful, but we can certainly do that. The technology exists, and we can isolate those few streets downtown where we don't need them, if we don't want them in Pine Street Mall, if we don't want them. But the comparison this last time we were all in Spokane to when we were in Spokane 3 years ago or 4 years ago was amazing. There was junk scooters all over the place when we were there before, and they've solved that problem. And there's also some really good guidelines in here about selecting a contractor and how you put together. I mean, this is absolutely fantastic, and we don't need to reinvent all of this data because it's here. Let's make something happen.
Becky and then Francis, and then we'll go to Ann.
So direction? I'm looking at 12.11.020, number 3, under their prohibited areas. And it seems to me that would be the area that we would suspend. Maybe put in something, I mean, you've made a note about construction. I appreciate that. I actually had to go on Bishop today to go to my dentist, and I cannot imagine a scooter in that area. So maybe the prohibited area, we could say construction areas or something like that, so when construction is happening downtown. I, too, liked Spokane. I thought 15 miles an hour would be quite reasonable. I would love 7 miles an hour downtown. I think that would be reasonable. That's my direction.
Francis.
So it's relates to recommendations. I think a public hearing would be good. I like the idea of doing a suspension of part of the stuff right now, and I would recommend a suspension that goes till the start of construction, and then that's the time when we, and that gives us the time to get the data that we need. Related to the scheduled construction, this is the May 7th is street tear up, but we're going to do pre-stuff in April, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want, because some citizens might see that May 7th and think that we just rolled the date back from when we're starting. Yeah. So I don't want that confusion. They do have excellent apps right now that gives maps of where you can go. You're able to set speeds in different areas, and so I think that's something to look at. Are there certain areas where we want to restrict speeds as opposed to others? As it relates to the letter, I agree with Councilmember McCall. Spokane is different 3 years ago compared to today. They were tripping over them 3 years ago, and with the geofencing and the fines that they get, they still get charged if they don't put it back it's supposed to go. The one that I don't see on here is it'd be good for us to check to see if there's any restrictions from funds that we receive for building any of our parks or any of our trails, if there is a federal restriction related to motorized vehicles or something related to some of the funds. I know sometimes there's some things attached to that. So as it relates to our trail system and as it relates to our parks, I just want to make sure that we keep up with all the requirements related to any of the funds that were received. I don't think there's going to be a problem. It'd be good to check that. Thank you.
And
I just had a point of clarification, Councilmember McCall. So because we were talking about the code, but then also talking about, so you were mentioning about contracting with Lime or somebody like that. But tonight, are we, that's just kind of future ideas, but we're not really addressing that tonight?
No, certainly not.
Okay,
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
we're just making sure the law allows us to try it out.
Right.
Nathan,
okay.
did you want?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to follow up.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that the scooters may not have been downtown. They may have been cleaned up because AWC was happening. But I tell you what, you go across the river, all over the place. When I went to Clinkerdaggers, they were strewn all over. So it may have been something of cleaning it up the downtown because AWC was happening. Just pointing that out.
I do like what the presentation we saw from Spin, and Chris was really instrumental in that in terms of they have places where they put it, and as long as you put your scooter there, then you're no longer charged. But if it's not in that place, that your ticket continues to run and it's going on your credit card. So they've got some really good restrictions. Geofencing is outstanding, is what they've got. So I think you heard different comments tonight, and I think everyone's leaning to suspend, try it out, and public hearing. I think that's a quick summary. And I'm getting a...
Are we suspending the entire code or just the ultra
This is going
prohibitive
to,
bits?
Thad, what do you recommend on this, our city attorney?
That would have to be at a later date. I don't know that there's a proposal right now to suspend certain sections of that.
Okay, that's what I
So you're going to come, staff is going to come back with the direction we've talked about, and with specifics, you're going through that code, looking at what we can suspend and how that's going to go,
Yes.
And with the time too.
and the time frame.
Just have a public hearing first. Can we do that before we start doing suspension and coming back and forth? I'd like to hear from the public first.
Let's take that one under, because we have to look at the calendar here to find out when we can do it.
And my
So-
understanding is the suspension is just to allow people to be able to use them
Right.
while we work out all the other details. Is that correct?
And then the public hearing, I heard from some people, was basically how to set the parameters and the conditions later on. And that's what I'm seeing, okay. And we'll hear from the public too, okay?
Is that right?
All right.
So just for clarification for staff and myself, public hearing at the next council meeting, August 8th?
No,
No.
we can't make a commitment tonight. We have to take a look at the agenda and what we've got planned.
Okay,
So we cannot say it's going to be August 8th, the public hearing. We have to take a look at that.
okay,
Public hearing in the future, that's as far as we can go,
okay.
okay?
And I think the tentative timeline that was suggested is like to start beginning of August to
Right.
accommodate students coming back, and then still giving us an ample time frame into April or May to make a determination as to what exactly we want to do.
But we have to look at everybody's calendar in terms of what they could do and come back and at legal review and what we want to recommend in terms of what the code, what suspension really means, all that. That has to have some work on it before we can set a specific date. But basically, you hear where we're heading. Okay.
I have a quick question for the council. Is the intent to have a public hearing before passing a resolution to suspend parts of the existing ordinance, or is the intent to have a public hearing after that?
For me, it's after, because I felt like the point of this was to suspend so that users could out there rate while we work out the
And we could test it,
details.
yeah.
And we can, but
Right.
that's just my take. I don't know if it's,
Agreed, because before, people are speculating, just as we are.
Right.
Now, we don't know. After we've had the experience, then we can come back and be much clearer on what works for our city.
So that I'm clear also, we're going to jump in the deep end with this for the city, and we're going to have the scooters, whether it's 25 miles, 15 miles on the trails, as well as the streets, right? I mean, that's essentially, it's kind of, you're loosening all the restrictions, and then we're going to find out. I don't know that's going to be a good thing.
That's not what I heard. What I heard was, based on what Spokane is doing, staff now, and this presentation, staff now is going to go back and create a recommendation for us of what we suspend and what we don't suspend, what speed limits there are, and then we will try that out for a limited time, and then get feedback from the community on that.
That
I
would
do not
be
see
what
that
I
as the
would like.
deep end. I see
Yeah.
that as a judicial,
Okay.
wise, cautious step forward.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
That I
that makes
heard.
sense.
that
Yeah.
makes sense, yeah.
okay. Eileen?
I think we're in danger of confusing the public is with the word suspend, and I think that goes to your question. It makes it-
Possibly.
it
I was a little confused.
It makes it sound like we're just tossing it all out.
No, we're not.
So it might be clearer if we use the word delete. We're going to do a Michigan line item style deletion of the existing code is what's under consideration as the first step.
But it will come back from staff with a recommendation before we
Yes.
take any action.
Yes.
Staff will be evaluating that, going through legal, determine what can be suspended, deleted, or
Deleted,
whatever
yeah.
else.
Yeah.
And that will come back at a later date.
I see it as more of a moratorium on enforcement
Yes.
of certain provisions.
We're getting a
Because
lot
we're
of
not
words in
gonna,
here.
we're not gonna line anything out, but a moratorium of enforcement to allow for the pilot
Test.
program.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense.
I believe
That
we have
makes
now
sense.
come to a consensus there.
Makes sense.
So hopefully you have that. All right, that concludes that discussion. The next item is any new business to come before the council tonight. If there's no new business, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?